Hey y'all, I'm Sarah, and today I want to share with you some practice tips while preparing for your NVYO audition. So first, I want to talk about the scale. One thing I would suggest thinking about when you play your scales is to approach them as a line of music rather than just an exercise or something to get through. If you can approach this and phrase beautifully and sing all the way through your instrument on the scale, you're not only going to feel better about how you played that scale, it's just your tone is going to be so much more rich and full. Next, I want to talk briefly about your G minor scale, your melodic minor scale. And so one important thing to note on melodic minor scales is that on the way up, the 6th and the 7th is raised, but on the way down, they are natural. Moving on, let's talk about this excerpt. So 138 may feel very fast for this excerpt, and you may be tempted to practice it right away at 120, 124, 130, 132, right up in that range of speed. But I'm here to tell you to resist that urge and to practice it slowly. One of the trickiest spots I think in here is jumping from this B to this B and doing it slurred. There are many ways to practice going from that middle B-ish to that high B, but one of my favorite ways is what I call coloring outside the lines. And by that I mean we're going to play every note in between chromatically just to get an idea of what type of motion we're talking about in our embouchure, in our air, etc., etc. Starting on this B, and we're going all the way up to this B. And we're going to go chromatically. This gives you kind of a framework to work between. You know that you start at point A, and you have to get to point B. You learned how you get there. So I recommend practicing that not just one time, not just 2 times, but 3, maybe 4, maybe 5, maybe 6. Practicing it until it sticks. And I would go nice and slow after you do at that chromatic scale in between and practice going from B to B, just nice and slow and tonguing it. And then when you feel ready, slur it. Now, one thing to keep in mind with these high notes is that your corners have to be quite firm, but this still has to be loose. Loose and flexible. Okay, so going off the idea of having firm corners, but an open and tall aperture with flexibility and kind of a little bit loose, but flexibility is kind of a good way to think about it. I want you to look at that high B descending scale, this part though. Now, it's easy for flutists to feel very compressed and very tight and kind of bring their upper lip here so it's very straight across. And this creates a very tight sound and doesn't give you a lot to work with when you're in that high register. In the upper register, we have to use higher pressure air, and we have to be very precise with where we're blowing it. And so if we close it too much, we just are cutting off all chances for success. Before we play this a little bit faster, I want to talk about dynamics. So the question becomes, how do we get these pianissimos to be really beautiful and then these fortissimos to be big and bold? So for example, at the beginning, we want to think of a really soft and sweet sound. Except it'll be a little bit faster, but how do we achieve that soft dynamic? So to achieve that soft dynamic, I think of air speeds. And so when I'm thinking of soft and pianissimo dynamics, I'm thinking of warmer air. Imagine you're fogging up some glass on a window, and then do your flute embouchure, and kind of has to be slow, it has to be relaxed, it has to be sweet. And then as you crescendo, that air gets ever so much faster. So I like holding up my hand because I feel like this is a really easy way to kind of feel whether your air is like cold, kind of like medium, is it warm, etc., etc. So kind of blow like, all right, that's really warm. Now get your fluteometer. It might not be as warm, and that's okay, but now think of a little bit faster air as you're going to do that crescendo. And that's one way that you can work on doing those soft dynamics. I like to describe this kind of air usage. It's like it's an exhale. On those pianissimo bars, you're exhaling the notes. Now, let's play this excerpt faster. Now, I want to talk about the optional piccolo excerpt. So, my first warning is that on piccolo, everything is smaller, but it does not mean it's tighter and like more like closed. We still have to be open when we play it. Thing I want to encourage you when you're playing piccolo is to ride the wave. Once something's working, don't change it, or if you do, change it just ever so slightly. I hear a lot of young piccolo players who change as much as they do on flute for each note or each interval, and then for piccolo it just doesn't work out. Piccolo is a much smaller instrument. I think we can all agree on that. And so any change that you do is going to be exaggerated. You have to think in smaller proportions than you do on flute. Now, let's talk a little bit about this excerpt. So let's go to 1, 2, 3, the third bar of this excerpt, and play that. I chose this for a reason. It starts to get high and it starts to get in that scary range for piccolo. Now, one thing about piccolo is that if you approach it with ever so much, just a little bit of fear, it's going to pick up on that and make everything sound out of tune and just really, really screechy. So same concept on the flute where we want to stay open here, but very firm here. Now, again, it is on a smaller instrument, so you are going to have to scale everything down, and the airspeed you use is going to be faster and just a little bit more condensed. As you approach that high E, I know it's decrescendoing, but I want you to go for it. I don't want you to back off. To stand tall, play that, and really focus on just blowing through to the end of this instrument. So with that, I just want to leave you with this for piccolo. When you pick up this instrument, you have to promise yourself that you're not going to play scared and that you're going to go for it and really embrace the unique sound this instrument gets to offer to the orchestra, to the wind ensemble, to just the group that you're playing in. And with that, I wish you luck in practicing and on your audition. And remember, when in doubt, practice it slow.